A lot of times in science, especially when it comes to writing things, it seems impossible until it's done. And so a lot of times that fear of getting started can be really paralyzing. But here are some tips that I have for when your writing project seems really overwhelming.
So I don't know about you, but when I'm faced with a writing project, so this can be anything from a report to a whole like paper to a whole thesis dissertation. So basically your whole PhD write-up to grant proposals, grad school apps, fellowship apps, any of these things, they can seem super duper scary. And it can seem like, how am I ever going to get that done? In cases like this, take a breath, remember that it is going to get done. And so think back about all the times you thought this in the past and then you did get it done. So I remember thinking like, how am I ever going to write a thesis? And then I did. And how am I ever going to write a paper? And then I did. So really you just have to think back to those past experiences and use them to remind yourself that really you're going to get this done. If you have a deadline or something, you can think like, okay, so the deadline is this date, and so that's 2 weeks from now. So in 2 weeks, this is going to be done. So don't use that. Don't be like, or I guess, don't, if this doesn't work for you, like maybe it stresses you out to think that you only have 2 weeks. But for me, I like to think, oh, in 2 weeks, this is going to be done. And so it might be a stressful couple of weeks, but it will get done. So what are some things that you can do to help make it a little less stressful? So first of all, just start writing. Um, you, and so when you start the writing, typically I just do like a really, really bad. I'm not worrying at all about how good it is. I know it's going to be bad. I know I'm going to have to do a lot of edits. Just get those words down on paper. So I totally do just like a word dump. It's okay if you're not using correct grammar or anything. You're going to fix it. So often most of the time when I start first write, it's a lot more conversationally, and then I have to go through and actually like make it more scientific-y. And so yeah, a lot of times with the things I do on my blog and stuff, I just don't edit because like I hate editing. And yeah, so hopefully people don't mind too much. But when you're doing like formal scientific writing, then you're gonna have to do, you might have to do a lot more. Okay, so get words down on paper. Once you have them down, you can cut down. And so typically I have to do a lot of cutting down. This is a big thing for me. But you want to make sure it's easier to cut things down. Well, it sounds like it's actually really hard to cut things down sometimes. But I mean, like, you don't have to actually create the words from scratch. Like if the words are in your head, put them down on paper, because once they're in your head, they can go away from your head and then you don't have them in your head. But if they're on paper, then you can always search for them and that sort of thing. Which brings me to my point that you should save lots of versions. So typically I save at least a version a day. If I make a lot of changes, I'll save like 2 a day, and I'll just like put the name of the file and like the date. And then if I have multiple, I'll do like _2 or whatever. And so then I have a file where I have all of the different, each date, and I can see them. When you have basically, if you are cutting out a lot of stuff, you can keep like a file. Sometimes I keep a file with like, I put the stuff that I've cut out. And this way, if I decided like, oh, I shouldn't have cut that out, then I can put that back in. And so there's going to be a lot of editing. So you want to start early, give yourself time to do those edits. Try not to get too attached to anything you write, because there will be a lot of edits. This is a normal part of the process. And so especially like if you give your colleague something to get their constructive criticism on it, don't be like insulted if they don't like something that you wrote or that sort of thing. It's really great when you can have other people look at your writing, because they'll have a fresh perspective. And so when you're like really in the weeds on your project, you can kind of forget that other people don't might not know something that you wrote down, like that you just assumed everybody knew and that sort of thing. They can also, like, sometimes if you just write, if you're reading over the same thing over and over and over, it like looks right even if it's not right. And so they can fix that sort of thing. If you're giving something to a colleague for such criticism or whatever, like don't like tell them what level of criticism, like feedback you want. Like tell them, okay, this is just like a rough draft, I'm just trying to get your overall thoughts about the concept. or this is my, I think that this is really done. And so can you look over it for like errors and the grammar and the spelling and that sort of thing. But if you give them like a really rough draft, then you like don't like make sure that they don't know that they don't have to be looking for edits or for like grammar problems or anything like that. But try not to give them something that's just like super duper drafty, unless you have like talked to them about it and they're like totally cool with that. And you're just like, can you just give me a rough, like just general thoughts? But don't expect them to do like a ton of editing for you. And especially if you are giving it to like your boss, so like the PI, like the head of your lab or whatever, try to give them a very more polished version. And but you can like talk to them and that sort of thing along the way. Different people will have different styles, but you want to make sure that you are also like giving them plenty of time. So don't give it to them the day before it's due. Try to give them at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks, depends on the person. Yeah, so, but yeah. Okay, so when you do that initial word dump, like just try to keep getting words down. So give yourself a big block of time if you can. Maybe take a day off or a couple days off lab, like lab work or whatever. And so just give yourself plenty of time for focused writing. And don't let yourself get distracted by doing things like looking up references, or if you're like blanking on a word, instead just put a placeholder. So I just put like XXXXX or something, but make it really obvious so that you don't accidentally leave in this placeholder later. This way you can keep your thoughts flowing, and then later you can easily go back and add. Speaking of like getting in the zone, so yeah, so try to set aside blocks of time. So figure out when works best for you. So this is early morning for me. So like 4 a.m. my brain works best. So I just get out like several hours of like nonstop writing. And then my brain gets tired. And so I give it a break, so go for a walk, etc. Clear your head. I also do the hard parts, try to start the hard parts early, because like it's easy to think like, oh, I can just do that later, and then you get into that mode of procrastinating. But if you do that, then you're going to have less hard parts later on and you're going to have less time to do the edits and everything. So just go back to the whole thing about like, it's going to get done. And so just start and surprise yourself. Get those down. If you get stuck on one part, go to another, but remember to come back. If there's like boring stuff like paperwork filling out or whatever, don't forget about that. Remember that you're gonna have to do it. And so you can use that when your brain's more tired. You don't have to think as much for that sort of thing. So I tend to do like that sort of work in the afternoon, and then I do the more hardcore writing in the morning. And yeah, so if there's a bunch of different sections for something, you can kind of like, if they're ones that are going to be like more fun or easier or whatever, you can use those as kind of like treats for yourself when you're after you've done more of the really scary stuff. But the really important thing is to just like remember it's going to get done, take a breath, remember it will get done, but you have to start. So if you don't start, then it's never going to get done. But really you just have to believe in yourself, believe that you're going to do this, and get going. So good luck everyone with whatever you're writing, and try to relax, take a breath, calm down, breathe. Okay, now it's back to writing for me.
And finally, remember that it's never going to be perfect. Even if you were like the best writer in the world, it's never going to be perfect. And there comes a point when it's just not worth the time and energy. You just need to get it to that, like, I tried my best, I gave it my effort, and let's go. Also, like, remember to give yourself credit for what you do. And so like at the end of the day, like look back and think, okay, this morning I was like, oh my god, I can't even like start, and now look, I got these like 3 paragraphs down. Or for me it's more like I cut out 3 paragraphs, but typically it's more like just modifying the paragraphs so that the same amount as getting rid of 3 paragraphs, but I'm not getting rid of 3 whole paragraphs. But yeah, anyway, so just take a second to say like, yeah, I accomplished stuff. I did it. I can do this. And you can do this. I believe in you. Now go get it.